The disconnect of us as a people is very intentional, which is still going on now. You asked the question in terms of how we see each other. When the first time Africans come here, they get orientated by the government. And as a matter of fact, they tell them specifically to stay away from us. And what they do is they show the worst of us as African Americans versus our best. So African Americans are like every people. We have good and we have bad. We are mostly good. The things that we do are mostly good. But if all the messages that you're getting are negative, and you see things like, which is something you all don't know anything about probably, Amos and Andy, where we're these buffoons and we're running around trying to satisfy master, then it's just something that's totally embarrassing, that of course they don't want to have anything to do with that. And the same in terms of our children. And here's the one thing that we don't pay close enough attention to. These cartoons that we sit our children in front of, these messages that these crazy cartoons, as a matter of fact, the way that they show Africa and African people, I wouldn't want to have anything to do with it either. Why would you want to have something to do with a people that are always starving? Why would you want to go to a starving continent? Why would you want to go to a place where people can't take care of themselves? And this is these messages, and if this is the only message that you're getting, then you want to identify with those that have something. And who is that have the greatest? It's white folks. So that we have a certain percentage of black folks who identify more in terms of the whiteness of the society rather than the greatness of themselves. So the peace becomes one in terms of things like Russell is talking about, in terms of bringing us together in circle and having those conversations and looking at what that collective leadership looks like. Because whether we see ourselves as being leaders or not, it's not that we have all of the answers. Being a leader is understanding that we have to hear the voices of everyone, and how do we take the best of the ideas in terms of moving ourselves forward as a people. And so, I mean, we can see that this has happened over and over again. We have a history of this. We have Marcus Garvey. Marcus Garvey had the largest black organization in the world at a time when we didn't have all this technology. There was no internet. There were no cell phones. But he was able to organize black folks, 5 million, all over the world. I mean, like in South Africa, if you were caught with one of the UNIA newspapers, you could be killed. But the hunger of our people, whether we know it or not, is so much there. As a matter of fact, Malcolm said that Africa is so ingrained in black folks that when they hear the drums and when they hear the music, it's this natural progression that we have as a people. So that when children, for example, when they come to Wewin Institute and we have rituals that they do, one of the rituals are, we are an African people. And it's lively, and as a matter of fact, it's one of their favorites. But we are an African people, and don't you forget it. Well, not only in terms of our children, but also in terms of staff that has worked for me before. When we do that, I'm not no African. Don't call me no African. By the time they leave, though, they understand that they're African people. So the piece that we have to be, one, is that we have to be patient with ourselves. We have to love ourselves, and that even if we don't get it right away, that we help each other in terms of building until we can then begin to have a love and appreciation for who we are as African people.
Well, I don't want to sound fatalistic, but I have been studying, and I think as I said, when I was in Ghana, I started asking myself a series of questions about how do economic systems, how are economic systems reflective of the cultures of the people when the time frame of what we refer to is so long ago, right? And so we are all operating under this dominant white male economic system. It's infiltrated every part of who we are. And the fatalistic part is that one of the things that I read last year, or reread last year at the beginning of COVID, was The Parable in Sorrow that was written by Octavia Butler. And as you all, I don't know if you've read The Parable in Sorrow, but The Parable in Sorrow takes place in the year 2024 after a president whose initials were DT, and every economic structure, system, transportation, finance, agriculture, all falls apart. Everything's gone. We have no model. There's anarchy. People are killing people for no reason. There's racial and cultural bias. It's horrible. And the thing that saves us, in according to Octavia Butler, who a sister named Adrienne Marie Brown says was a prophet, not a science fiction writer, is that she's written this whole series that I've been studying and using in my strategic and business planning called Emergent Strategies. And Emergent Strategies says is that we have to look at other models of how we form and organize and create systems. And those other models are in nature, and those other models might be those cultural, or there's familiar and community kinds of things. And if we could use those models, because what we have now is not going to be here. And so we've got to stop thinking about how do we make it better for ourselves, or how do we, I don't like the word equity. I don't want to be equal to you people. I want to be free of you people. Right? And so I don't want to create models of this is how we're going to finance this based on how the community development financial institutions from the United States Treasury figures out how we're going to finance. Because if we go to that model, that's not, we have to figure out new stuff. So I'm in this whole world of what is new and how do we rid ourselves? Because we are all, I am as impacted by the whole kind of economic cultural system. I drive a big car. I live a big life in terms of doing that. I like my stuff, right? But all of this really kind of connects us to this culture that I don't want to be a part of anymore. That is literally, in my opinion, and this is where people say, well, today you can't say that. But I read that book. And I believe she was a prophet, not a science fiction writer. And I think that we are seeing every day, I wake up and I see some new thing that I said, oh, there was a pandemic. Oh, there was a, you know what I mean? And it's like, okay, stay safe, do what you got to do. Lachelle Cunningham, and I'm hanging out with all you young people who are teaching me how to forage in the woods and eat food and learn technology, because I'm going to latch on with one of you or my grandkids at some point in time when all of this falls apart or die. That's the other thing. The other thing is, at my age, maybe I won't be able to see the total destruction, right? But it has to. Any religion says, or anything says, that you cannot have this evil that has been on this earth and has done as much as we have seen, and that we saw it at magnitudes that are just absolutely unbelievable when we were in the richest continent on the planet. And it can't be that way forever. It just can't. So that's how not to sound like the doom and gloom person, but I'm preparing. Right? So.
I think being intentional in some ways. Because once again, we say all the principles during Kwanzaa. We're excited. We go through our principles of Kwanzaa. We talk about, Nia. We're like, it's about purpose. And we go a little further. We're like, Ujama, it's going to be our collaborative, cooperative economics. I think we have to do it. Not just a few times during the year, lifestyle. So as I think about the experience for those who went on the trip with us, many had already been doing it. And so what it allowed us to do was then to connect with the work that was already in existence. So I felt the trip and everything that we've done is an extension of that Black ecosystem, because we came back. One thing that we have to talk about, I came back renewed and re-energized to be able to put my foot on the motherland, be surrounded by my people, good food, good nourishment. We had a good time too. It wasn't all about lectures and, just different experiences. We had a time to sit back and relax. That's another thing that I don't think our culture allows for. You're on the go 24/7. Whether it's through technology, whatever you're doing, you're constantly, everybody's default, how are you? Busy. But you notice when you're in Ghana, you ask someone how they're doing, they open with, by God's grace, I'm doing well. And they'll tell you about, by God's grace, I'm here today. They'll say something that acknowledges their connection to the Black ecosystem, both physically and spiritually. So when you take all that in, it can't help but to give you the direction that we had to come back home and find new ways to be connected. Like Mr. Ray and I, yes, we are connected. Of course I wave, good to see him as my brother and our community elder. But now I text him. Now I call him, say, what do you think about this? How do you think we should work on this project? It's a real relationship. So the Black ecosystem is about a mindset, is about a cultural shift that brings it together, not just for one time, for the trip, but for a lifetime.
So again, I'll use the term that the Black ecosystem to me, and what I saw when I went to Ghana, was kind of the expanse of it, both kind of the positive and negative, and that the reality that as Black folks and Africans, that there's positives and negatives. Again, going along with that idea of that there's going to be this panacea or this wonderful experience when and that it feels like home, that everything's going to be like perfect, and it wasn't. It's not. And so being able to accept that, and kind of within the context of, again, here in the United States, having to be, or I was raised that you act a certain way when you're out in public because you represent all Black people. Which in and of itself is a burden. That's why I call it being whitewashed, because it was thinking about only what white people thought and not about how we felt. So as a human being, you didn't get to just be yourself, right? So from that standpoint, there was this sense of like freedom to view the reality of Black human beings. They're human beings that are my ancestors, and that means that it could be anything and everything. It's not that I ran across nefarious people, but again, some of the politics and the different things that happen with that, just seeing some of that. And individuals, I think when the first day we were there, we were down on the shore, and there's people that, I can't remember what they're called, but there was a lighthouse there, and they had just come through there, I believe, like a couple of weeks prior to that, and kind of cleared it out.
Oh, yeah.
It was comparable to like our tent cities. And we saw this argument between, two people about how dare you bring tourists down here. Kind of, that was my gist of what was going on. And they're like, you know what? We need to make money too. If they want to see it, cool. Let's take them through here. There's stuff for them to see. They need to learn. They need to know. That's what's here. That's what we have to offer. So that was my take on what was happening, right? So just to see that piece, and again, it didn't, no one was killing each other or anything like that. But again, seeing that whole, from the really nice houses and mansions, right? To, again, the shacks, comparable to the ones that I had seen in Tennessee, where my people are from, my dad's people are from. To see, so it's that whole thing of seeing just the whole expanse. And it wasn't one way or the other, it just was, as far as human beings. And that it just gets to be that. And that it functions fine, right? We can always do better or always help those that don't have a whole lot or whatever. But it just gets to be, I think a lot of times here I feel like, who's to blame? Who do we need to hold accountable? Why isn't this working? And, we're just kind of running in circles as relates to that. But sometimes it kind of just is, and we can help where we should and could help. But as human beings, sometimes that's just how it falls out. So that's what I got as far as looking at that and seeing that it's okay to just be, and that we do our best, and that gets to be, sometimes that's enough, So that's kind of what I kind of the message.
I think prior to my trip to Africa, I had this inflated idea of what an authentic ecosystem was. The reality is our brothers and sisters on the continent have also been disrupted by colonization and slavery. And so being able to be in Senchi Ferry and be in the village and not in the city, you got to see some of that. But my question always is what got interrupted? What didn't get to get transmitted? What things are commercial and colonized? That, I wanted to be this idea of this perfect, pristine Africa, and the reality is that that's not the case. Colonization and slavery has affected those on the continent to a different degree, but have affected them as much as slavery has affected us and destroyed us here. And so I think we still need to redefine what the Black ecosystem is. I think we actually need to build that based on where we are headed as a people, and that it's still yet to be defined. I know that Black families are really important in our community. I think one of the challenges that we need to grapple with is that Black family looks different. It's not a monolith. There are single Black families, there are married Black families, there are queer Black families, there are Black families where there's just one person that lives by themselves. We need to, and is doing community with a whole bunch of other people who they may not necessarily be blood related to. And so we get to create what we want. We get to create our future. We get to define for our future what we want to see, what's going to be helpful for us. And so I named the Black family because I think that's only one instance where I think there's a lot of creativity and ingenuity that we can put in to see what we want to see in the future, so that all of Black people, regardless of what their family structure is are sustained, are supported, are loved and cared for. When I think about the Black ecosystem, I think those are the values that need to undergird it. How do we make sure that no one is lost? How do we make sure that everyone gets invited to the cookout? How do we make sure that everyone feels like they have what they need to be well and to be sustained? What that looks like, we still need to define, but if those are the values that undergird it, we can't go wrong.
To find an area that you're gonna focus on and just be expert at it is another thing. Because my dad had a 3rd grade education, but he built manholes from Tennessee to the Gulf of Mexico that did for the farmers, and he was hired by the Corps of Engineers to do it because they could not do it. He did for the farmers what the Hoover Dam did for them out in the Midwest. And so just find an area that you can focus on and become expert at it. It doesn't matter whether you are doing it in the arts or in the land or in business, whatever. And then I had another brother, not another brother, but a brother who also had a 3rd grade education that became a millionaire by the time he was 50 in Georgia, building houses, apartment buildings, and churches. If you just find something that you can do and become good at it, then people will hire you to do that work. And that's another thing I think people can do. Just find what you can do and become really good at it. Don't let other people outdo you. And you can have a large education and not do much with it, because I know a lot of people with PhDs and they don't do very much. They don't contribute very much to the society. They, you put them on programs and stuff like that and use their titles, but what do they contribute to the society, to your economy? And so just find something that you're good at and just be the best at it. It doesn't matter your education, it just matters your qualifications and your expertise.
And I feel like since I've been back, I've been able to. My one connection is with the Ghana trip was I have access to health supplies that the organization I work with sends to Bolivia, and there's a certain amount of those supplies that we have a great amount of, so that those things I like to be able to share them wherever I can. And so I've been able to, when we went to Ghana, to take some of those things along, but also to now be thinking about how can I can connect with Artika and perhaps send some more things, or do that on a bigger scale. On a personal level, here in the Twin Cities, I am always looking for places where I can spend my dollar in community, and that includes the Black community. So going to there are several events in the city where you bring people who have Black businesses together to sell their products, and I've gone to a couple of those and bought things. So just becoming aware of those possibilities here in the city, and to be able to support them I think is important.
Well,
Do you have?
well, I think, one of the things that I think about when you say that Black ecosystem, I think in Ghana, one of the things that was, again, a little hint of home, like Chicago home, but different. It was that system of like people walking up and down the street selling all types of merchandise, like walking in traffic, like they're in it's a red light. You have people walking by your vehicle selling everything. Like you can get everything you need on your way at home, and you don't have to get out of your car. Mm-hmm. And so but it's that thing of like, these women who have kids, tied to their back, and they have this huge pan of something on their head, and it's peanuts or it's plantains or whatever it is. And it's that sense of like, here's what you need as you're on your journey. You don't have to deviate from your journey, and that sense of helping folks in that process. But then also going to the market, that was just phenomenal. Like, at the market you can get everything and anything you need, and but it's all Black people selling to other Black people, and so it's get the daily needs, get the meat, the shea butter, the whatever and so that ecosystem of them having the ability to get these produce or whatever it is, to maintain it, to cook it, prepare it, and then to have the person who goes out and sells it, like that it's more than one person who's doing all that work. And it feels good to be able to be a part of that system. For us though, it was mostly as consumers, but it was that support. And so
I was born and raised in the old Rondo neighborhood where the freeway goes through. And as a young man growing up, before they took my grandpa's home, I was about 12 or 13 years old. That's all I saw was Black businesses. I saw folks working on the railroad. There was Tuskegee Airmen, there was janitors, there was a little bit of everybody, but there was a collective effort to keep the community elevated regardless of social and economic condition. We had Black businesses in St. Paul, Minnesota. We had them in Tulsa. We had them in other cities. So this is not anything new. you know, when the Vietnamese, the Southeast Asians, and some of the brothers and sisters from the continent, I would be in meetings rather, and they would talk about what's wrong with the black man here. How come you guys don't have businesses like the immigrants have businesses? Not having a clue about our collective history, that we had the same type of ecosystem that the Irish, Italians, and others had. The only thing that was absent from our system was the criminality. The Irish were thugs when they got here. The Jews were thugs when they got here. The Italians was thugs when they got here. But the thing that got us through was our moral authority and faith in Almighty God. That no matter what we put in the ground, something was going to come up. And so somehow, some way, we've got to get back to that. And the other thing I would, like to say is that if we could just get brothers and sisters from here and from the motherland to be more trusting and caring of each other, we could build on that. It's hard to jump from 0 to we're going to invest $1 million in each other. And somehow we've got to start at some kind of level and build that same trust that I think other cultures have, that have came over here and have been able to raise up their faltering economies. And there's many examples of that.